Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the next of our Essential series. I'm Lottie, founder of the Jura Society. We're a community of women wealth holders and their advisors, and we bring them together through education, connection, and collaboration across our three pillars of women, wealth, and well-being. Our private network, the Society, provides invitation-only access and knowledge to leaders in the private client and wellness industries. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Mahendree, partner at Lester Aldridge, to present on the Bank of Mum and Dad. Mahendree has over 18 years of UK experience in advising clients in relation to wills, estate and tax planning, trusts and estate administration. Please note this is for education purposes only, but if you do have any questions, please do pop them in the chat or reach out to myself or Mahendree directly. So I'm just going to bring her on now. Hello, good afternoon. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you doing?
Yes, all right, surviving. Um, so before we kick off, I'd like to just ask you who you are, what you do, and who your typical clients are.
So I am part of the private wealth team at Lester Aldridge. We are a full service law firm, but I spend my day talking to families and clients, mostly high net worth individuals, and we'll look at tax and estate planning and how to move family wealth to the next generation and how to do so in the most tax efficient way. So if you ever meet me, I'll tell you my superpower is to tell you how to die in the most tax efficient way. Yes.
Always fun at a party.
Always fun at a party, yeah. But I get the most questions at a party, so
Yeah,
must be doing something right.
fantastic. Yeah, and we're going to learn all about the Bank of Mum and Dad today, which, as you know, you pointed out, it is one of the biggest lenders, effectively, in the UK
Exactly.
at the
Yeah.
moment. And it couldn't be more topical with all of the changes that are happening in the world. So really looking forward to this.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, before I keep jabbering on, I am going to leave you to share all. Right,
Great. We had a bit of technical difficulty, so hopefully this is all going to work.
it will
Um,
work. It'll be perfect. Right, see you in a bit.
See you in a bit. So just getting my slides up. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the Bank of Mum and Dad, just briefly to cover what I'm going to look at. So looking at what the Bank of Mum and Dad means, we also see it interchangeable with the Bank of Family, looking at loans and gifts, how we protect family wealth, things like documenting and formalizing your arrangement. Also touching briefly on some of the alternatives to direct financial assistance that I'm seeing when I'm advising clients. A brief look at the upcoming regulatory changes or trends and how that's impacting gifting with families. And then hopefully I could leave you with some practical tips and advice. So, what is the Bank of Mum and Dad? And I don't know if this resonates with any of you. So, I think back to my teenage years when I was probably often asking my parents for more money than I should, and it's usually for some outlandish purchase. Probably needed some more clothes or the latest Doc Martens, and my dad would look at me and go, "What do I look like? A bank?" And this kind of concept, from going on from kids asking parents for just normal money for purchases, has actually moved on and grown a lot in current years. With the cost of living being what it is, I've seen headlines about it being awful April with utility bills rising, cost of living rising, interest rates, that sort of thing, property prices. Finding it that a lot of clients that I'm advising who have children that are well established in their careers, earning well, but finding it really, really difficult to save and saving for that big financial purchase or that big financial event. And it's moved on from just mum and dad. It's moving on to grandparents and great aunts and great uncles who are stepping in to help these family members. But what I see more commonly is assisting with deposits for first-time home buyers. I mean, we often see a bit of financial assistance being provided by grandparents to assist with school fees. But today I really want to cover more focus on the property purchase and first-time buyers. I work very closely with our residential property team here. So we often ask to come in and advise families, especially where this kind of financial help is coming in to operation. I love a bit of stats, so let's have a look at that. We find that the average gift alone last year, and these are figures that I took off Legal and General's recent analysis, was over 27,400, and this is the average nationwide. With London, it was looking closer to £78,000. With the average London home is about £675,000. So London, much bigger contribution from parents. Almost half of under 35s who recently bought a home received financial help. Oops, sorry, this didn't load very well, but basically, if we go back, the figure that would have been there was 335,000 house purchases were supported by the Bank of the Family. And the total Bank of Family gifts, I think it was something around, I do apologize because my slide hasn't downloaded, something about 9 million, but I can share these figures with you later. So you can see it's quite substantial family investment that we're having. But unlike the normal bank scenario where you have source of funds, there's structured loan agreements, and that sort of thing, we're finding with family arrangements, are very much a loose arrangement, not very structured. There's no clarity with a family member as to whether it's a loan or a gift. So there are two ways this financial assistance can occur. It could be a loan, and basically you know mum and dad lending a sum of money to a child for the purchase. There is a structured, or should be a structured, repayment plan or an agreement as to how this would work, how if there's interest, how much of interest it would be charging. But we're finding clients don't have this. They just have this loose arrangement. I've loaned you this money, repay me at some stage. More stats for you on this has found that 8% of customers took financial advice when making a family loan, and only 14% took legal advice. So if you can see, there's lots of opportunities for this to go wrong. So if we're going back to the loan scenario, it's very, very important for clear communication. Discuss the terms of the loan. Look at how repayment would work. Are you charging interest? Remember, if you're charging interest, that's income. You'll have an income tax issue to think about. And very importantly, is the loan secured or unsecured? Secured means it'll be registered against the property, but then there's an impact on that because banks are not really happy with that sort of arrangement, because this is seen as a creditor against the property, and then the equity in the property likely to be reduced as a result. So banks not very keen on this kind of arrangement. So often parents then have an unsecured loan, which, although if you have it documented, what are your rights and obligations if your child fails to pay? And at the same time, are you going to consider taking your child to court if they're defaulting on payment? So there's really difficult conversations to have. I mean, I often see some people say, well, actually, I've got to be realistic about this. I'd like to have a loan agreement. I'd like to have this in place. I'd have to have a repayment structure, but I think I've got to be wise and think about how much am I really going to need this money in the future? Am I really going to take my child to court to force a sale of their home? So important points to discuss with children. The obvious one and the most common one seems to be a gift. Outright gift to your child. No, you can have no recourse. There's no repayment. There is a bit sometimes of a part gift, part loan scenario happening. And once again, if you do have this, bear in mind, if it's a part loan, make sure that that part is documented properly. Make sure the gift is documented properly. Obviously, with a gift, there's inheritance tax implications. The 7-year rule kicks in, so after 7 years, the gift falls out of your estate for inheritance tax. But very important looking at gifting, excuse me, especially if you have multiple children and you're looking at equalizing gifts later on. And obviously, with children, they might be in different stages of their lives, so different stages of entering the property market. So, you might have given a gift to your child 5 years ago, and now looking at equalizing that gift. Often parents think about, well, actually, if I've given child A £100,000 5 years ago, they've gotten the property ladder. Obviously, that's changed. They've built up some equity. Property market's risen. Giving £100,000 to child B now might not really equate to the same thing. So, so a lot of parents consider indexed, linked calculations for the gifts to try and equalize the gifts. Also very important, it might be that you sadly die before you've equalized the gift. So I'd suggest having a look at your will and putting in place what we call a hodgepodge clause. Clients always love it when I bring this up. I think purely because of the name. But what it says is basically, if you've made any gifts to any beneficiaries in your lifetime and they are beneficiaries of your estate and your will, those gifts are brought into account when you're calculating the eventual distribution of your estate. So there's a way of equalizing that. So those are things worth thinking about. So it is quite scary when you think about the statistics about clients not taking the proper legal and financial advice and missing out those key things. Also very important is protecting that family wealth. We're finding a lot of loans made to children who are in relationships, and that child then obviously being the higher contributor to the property purchase. If they're unmarried, obviously there's no mixing of the assets and no issue on that sounds. But then there's other issues that you create, because especially instances where the child has purchased the entire property and said partners living at the property and probably contributing to bills and that sort of things. There's no clear structure. So we look at, make sure there's some agreements in place. If they're paying rental, have something like a tenancy agreement, have a cohabitation agreement. If they're married, or about to get married, look at putting a prenup, or if they're already married, look at putting a postnup in place. But most importantly, I think, always have a declaration of trust, which sets out what each party's contribution is out to the legal costs, deposits, how things like distribution of the equity would work on sale, contribution to improvements to the property. Because if you don't have a declaration of trust, then the presumption or the legal presumption is that you own this equally. So it's really, really important, if we're looking at protecting family wealth, to make sure those documents are in place. So basically, things you'd need to look at. A loan, you need to have a loan agreement. Think about whether you're making a charge against the property, what that charge would look like. Very, very important. Have your child have a declaration of trust. Or if you're someone buying a property with a partner and there's an unequal contribution, make sure you have a declaration of trust in place. Very, very important for both the child and the parent is look at your wills, review your wills, amend your wills to account for the gift to the child. Or if you are the child, what happens to your share in the property if you die? Does it go back to your parents? Does it go to siblings? Does it go to your partner? So get those reviewed. Also, often forgotten are powers of attorney. I think they go part and parcel when you're doing your wills. Get your power of attorney done. If you're a parent, obviously you are you're reaching the age where things like mental capacity issues could come into play, and there might be a need for your attorney at some point to convert that loan to a gift, or to make a demand on that loan. So not having a power of attorney in place makes that very difficult. Look at putting in cohabitation agreements, prenups, postnups. They, although not not the most romantic topic when you are entering into a relationship, buying a property. But we're finding that clients are more sensible about that. The younger generation are more sensible about that sort of thing and are open to those discussions. So definitely get some advice on that. And don't forget tenancy agreements. Formalize that child living with a partner was contributing towards bills, doesn't have a share in the property, so you don't have any issue later on. More stats, because it's always easier to look at numbers. So looking at families that provided loans and gifts and their arrangements, 82 customers were not charging interest on the loan. And this is a study that was done on the Bank of Mum and Dad by the Family Building Society in conjunction with the London School of Economics. And you found that 2/3 of customers expected loan repayment as and when their child could afford it, rather than agreeing a fixed repayment schedule. We find often what clients are doing is they're looking at, well, actually, let's take the sum of money, I'll loan it to my child now, but that's really earmarked for later life planning and care home fees and that sort of thing. So by not really structuring that, not having a clear repayment plan, you putting yourself in a difficult position by not having the funds when you need it. 84% of customers did not draw up a formal deed of gift. 78% of customers did not have a formal loan contract in place. So going back to the figures on help, with the average low financial assistance in London being £78,000, there's quite a large amount of money being passed with families and not having proper structures and formal agreements in place. It's a bit worrying. Looking at the alternatives to direct financial assistance, I'm going to cover two. The first one is guarantor. So basically, you stand guarantee for your child on the mortgage bond. If they fail to pay, you become liable. So I think, definitely speak to your financial advisor about putting in place some income protection insurance for both parent and child. Also, as a parent, I think it's very important we see that they don't really think about whether they can meet those payments if the child fails to do so. And remember, you become responsible as a parent. So it's important to do your numbers and think about that. Also, what you might find with this sort of arrangement is that we see there's a limit to the number of lenders who may be amenable to this arrangement, especially if the guarantor is close to retirement. So it's something to think about. Get the proper financial advice around that. And it also might impact you, the guarantor, and your future borrowing. So think about this before, entering into such an arrangement. The second one we see often, well, not really often now, and that's the joint mortgage. And generally, a parent goes on as owner and named on the mortgage, and it helps to boost, using the parent's income to help boost the mortgage options to the for the child. Effectively, you end up owning a share in the property, and with the stamp duty charges on additional properties, that almost always there's an increased rate on additional property charge on the transaction. So regardless of whether it's the child's first time buying, the parent could own a property or be married to someone that owns a property, and they automatically caught in that net. And then obviously owning a share, if there's a growth in value on your share and you do come to sell that property at a later stage or decide to gift it to your child, there are capital gains tax implications to think about. So moving on to some upcoming regulatory changes or trends. Obviously, everyone knows that the SDLT rates changed of today. If any of you had any colleagues working till midnight last night trying to get transactions over the line, we've gone back to rates that were 2022 in 2022. So the rates from nil rate for stamp duty has gone down from £250,000 to £125,000. Definitely going to see a higher stamp duty charge there with property purchases. More and more parents called in because it's difficult saving just for the deposit. Adding the SDLT charge on that is, quite exorbitant for first-time buyers. So we're probably going to see more parents stepping in, seeing this bank of mum and dad growing. We've had some changes to inheritance tax, with inheritance tax coming into the IHT net in a few years' time. So lots of parents have been speaking to me about accessing pensions and speaking to their financial advisors about that. Obviously, it's not my area, and I would say speak to your financial advisor about accessing your pension. Parents talking about taking large chunks out of their pension to, gift it to children to get onto the property ladder, starting that 7-year clock running. There's an increase in rates in second homes. But what I've been seeing, and we're reading a lot about this as well, it's been the press, is there's been a rise in lifetime mortgages and equity release. And that's purely parents realizing the equity in their property, raising a mortgage against it, gifting those funds to children, starting the 7-year clock, and obviously having a debt in their estate, reducing the value of their estate for inheritance tax, and in that way kind of saving tax. But once again, all these options are really great, but just remember that key thing is to speak to your financial advisor about it. I always find financial advisors online, and Lottie, you probably could speak to this. They do a really great thing, or have called cash flow analysis, and looking at what you would need as a parent for your later life, what surplus funds you have. And that's really, really great in helping you decide whether you can actually go ahead and make that gift. So, practical tips and advice. Take financial and legal advice as soon as you're considering this. Don't be that 8% that didn't take financial advice, or the 14% that didn't take legal advice. Engage in clear and open communication with family members. Money is not the easiest subject to raise. Make it clear to your children if it's a loan and not a gift. And most importantly, document whatever you're doing. Whether you're making a gift, do a deed of gift. Whether you're having a loan, have a loan agreement in place. You'll find that with the property lawyers, if you're making a gift from a source of funds angle, you need to show where this came from. So you need to have either a gift letter or a deed of gift showing that the funds were a gift from a parent or a grandparent. So it's really, really important to have the right documentation in place. And that's it. Sorry, it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour through the Bank of Mum and Dad, but it's as we said before, it's a topical issue. The Bank of Mum and Dad is seen to be the 10th largest mortgage provider in the world, and is ranking at something as number 6 in the UK. And I just see that standing growing, and becoming probably 5, and lower down the ranks. Yeah, and that's it.
Hang on. Oh, sorry. Thank you so much for that. That was super, super helpful. We've got one comment on here about, is it useful to have a codicil, as your partner could write a will or take you out of the property? Something to state that the prenup takes priority.
Yeah, so just remember, you could have a declaration of trust, and we tend to have declarations of trust, especially with unmarried people, to show, and we put in a clause that says we intend for this declaration of trust to take effect even post-marriage. But just to say, I'm not a family expert, so if something like that happens, I always speak to one of my colleagues that does this. Yes, and prenups and postnups tend to take precedence. But if there's nothing in place, I always think that's showing that there's an intention. Important to remember is that marriage cancels a will. So if you are getting married, you would, and if you have arrangement already pre-marriage where you've got this loan or this unequal contribution, you would need to redo your will and give provision to that. But yes, once again, it depends on matrimonial assets, what the courts are looking at, equalizing. But I think the more the more documentation evidence you have to show evidence of what the intention was between the parties, I think that's it gives you a better chance of arguing that point in court. I don't know if that's sufficient to answer that question, but yeah.
Yeah.
So do will. I mean, codicils are great for if you're making amendment to your will. So if you've had a will, just for example, if you had a parent made a gift, that the will is the way it is, and they just want to maybe add the hodgepodge clause that I spoke about, you can do a codicil adding that, or a codicil speaking about that gift. Often I find personally it's just better to do a new will, because it might be that their will is quite old. You need to refresh it. It all depends on what stage the will was at and how long ago it was drafted. But yeah, those are like triggers anyway for you to look at your will.
Yeah, and I like the that tip about actually doing the powers of attorney at the same time as the will. That's a no-brainer.
Yeah, 'cause when you die, sometimes the money will take care of itself. There's intestacy provisions. It might not get to where you want it to go, but I've often see this with clients who have not put in powers of attorney in place, and they've lost mental capacity, or I've always talked about this example I had of a client who was in his 30s, got knocked off his bike,
Yeah.
and was the breadwinner, had a young wife and child, and everything was in his name. And suddenly we're rushing off to court to get a deputy application, and that takes a while. That's expensive. So yeah,
It's
definitely
another form of
consider.
insurance, really, isn't it? For
Definitely
peace of mind.
peace of mind. Definitely another form of insurance. Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. Excellent. Well, wow. Thank you so much. Lots of food for thought there, and especially with the changes to the stamp duty. I think that, that is going to be interesting to see how that plays out, especially in London.
Yes, definitely.
Well, thank you. And thank you to everybody tuning in. If you're watching this on repeat and you do have any questions, feel free to submit these either to myself or Mahendree directly. And thank you again. We'll see you later.
Are we done?
Yeah, we're done.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.